So I don't know about y'all, but I know for me, it seems like the older you get, the faster time goes. And it does not seem like it was already over a year ago, or I guess it's not quite a year, but almost a year ago that we were sitting here talking and watching last year's E3. And then here we are about a week away now from the next E3. And I thought it'd kind of be cool to go back and look at what Sony and Microsoft promised us last year and see how much of it they actually delivered. And so I'm not going to go over every single minute detail, starting from the beginning and going through, but I will just hit on like the major points, the major games, the announcements from both of these companies, and just kind of rehash which ones actually followed through. So we'll start with Microsoft, and I'm sure you remember, last year this is the best games lineup in history. And so, that's a subjective statement, of course, and if you ask me, I don't think that it was the best games lineup in history, but let's look at what they showed. So Microsoft started off with Halo, which shipped out on time, along with Forza 6, Gears of War Ultimate, Rare Replay, along with Tomb Raider. So all those games were given a release date, and they all hit those release dates, so they get points for that. Microsoft also revealed backwards compatibility, which they also delivered on. They said they were going to have 100 games out by the end of the year, and they were able to easily do that. They also continued to add new games almost every month. I think right now the number of games is somewhere around the 200 marker. So Microsoft also announced the games preview, where you could go play games that were still in development. This seemed to do well for games like, Elite Dangerous. That's like the only one that I can remember people talking about and actually going through with it. I know that they had a few more games, but there just wasn't a lot there throughout the rest of the year. So, they delivered by, giving it to you, but they didn't really put a whole lot of games into it. It just didn't turn out as exciting as I had originally hoped for. They also followed through finally with their Fallout 4 mods being delivered on Xbox. That happened just a few days ago. ReCore was said to come out in spring of 2016. Last time I checked, we have now entered summer, so that didn't meet the deadline. Fable Legends was supposed to be released by now, and as I mentioned a few weeks ago in a video, that game's been canned, so that definitely is not happening. They definitely failed on that front. We did get the Gears of War 4 beta, but we still don't know when the release date is for Cuphead or Sea of Thieves. We did get the Xbox Elite controller when they said we would. So overall, I would say Microsoft did an okay job of keeping most of their promises at E3. They weren't perfect, especially, considering Fable Legends was part of that best lineup ever, all those commercials and PR that was going on. But overall, I would say they delivered on definitely most of it. Moving on to Sony. So Sony is a little bit harder to pinpoint what they delivered on. And the reason why I say this is because you look at the biggest games that they showed off that have actually released so far. You've got Street Fighter, which was, of course, also on the PC, but it was heavily advertised for the PlayStation 4. And you had Uncharted 4, which just recently released. And so normally when you look at E3, you think of these companies as showing you things that are coming in kind of like the near future, in the short term. Not always. Again, you had like Sea of Thieves that was shown last year that we still don't have yet. But you do expect more titles to be shown that are coming short term. But with Sony, they didn't really play by those rules last year. They had a good number of games that they showed. They had a good list. They had, The Last Guardian. They had Zero Dawn Horizons. They had Dreams. They had Final Fantasy VII. They had a Kickstarter for Shenmue 3. They showed off more No Man's Sky. But out of all those games that I just rattled off, how many people are playing any of those a year later? Zero. So if you remember last year after E3 happened and I went through and I talked about both conferences, I said last year I thought that Microsoft had the better conference simply because they gave more details and dates with their games, whereas Sony kind of just left it wide open a lot of times, but basically said it's eventually coming. And so with a lot of these games, they did say that it's coming in 2016, so we still don't know if they delivered on that yet because it's still 2016. But a lot of these games still don't have a definite release date, which of course could mean that it gets pushed back. But at the same time, you really can't say that they didn't follow through with their plans because they didn't really give you detailed plans. So they did show off also Project Morpheus, which is still slated to come out later this year. And again, they ended the show with Uncharted, which did get delivered on time somewhat. It did get delayed a little bit, but not by a whole lot. So again, they didn't really make any promises that they could break, which I guess really isn't, a bad thing whenever you consider how many people were excited after that conference. So, Sony did themselves a favor. And so I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of these same games again this year at E3. And of course, hopefully we get a lot of new titles as well. And of course, since Sony is the new home of Call of Duty, I'm sure we're going to see a good showing for that and their new title. So overall, both companies did fairly well keeping the promises that they said they would. What do you think? Post your comments down below. And looking back, who do you think had the better conference at E3 last year? And what are you hoping to see this year? That does it for me, The Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Are you listening? Damn.